We're live. Hi, Danielle. We've got Danielle Smith with us today. We're going to talk all gardening. Yeah. So, Danielle, when I put this out to my Facebook group, and of course, we're streaming to YouTube now too. But when I put this out, I had tons of questions for you on gardening. So, I'm just going to go through some of those. I'm sure you've got the most common ones yourself. But let's start. Give people a couple minutes to jump on. Let's start with who you are and what you do. Give us a little background on yourself as a garden coach.
Yeah. So I'm a self-taught gardener. My background is actually in public health. So I definitely come to gardening from a lens of health. And so I kind of see myself both as a gardening coach and how to do things, but how to also use your garden to make you healthier and happier in your overall life. And I like to work specifically with moms because moms tend to be the people who oftentimes have an interest in gardening and have, this sense that they want to get started, but they also feel like time and energy is just such a limiting factor and they don't know how to get started. So I really love to work with moms and get them started with a garden that's successful and easy, but also isn't going to take much of time, and then can also help them have all the health impacts and the quality of life improvements that a garden really can help you have in your life.
Awesome. I'm really excited to touch base with you on gardening and learn all this stuff today. We've got some people hopping on. So if you're hopping on and you have any questions about gardening, definitely let us know. I know I struggle myself. I have some questions for you, Danielle, with just where to begin. And I've tried to garden in the past and I've just written myself off as having a black thumb, but I think you might be able to help me out here a little too. And so definitely if you have any questions about gardening, let us know. If you're catching this and you're not live, hashtag replay, I'll come back and I'll find you and we'll get your questions answered. So definitely ask questions. So let's start with one that I received from somebody, and she said she couldn't make it, but she was really, really interested in the tower garden. She has a tower, and it's been sitting outside, and she doesn't know where to even begin with the tower. Mm-hmm. Where should she start?
So for those of you that, I'm assuming she's talking about the white like tower garden that is like a product that you can buy now that you oftentimes will see online, but there's been versions of this for years it's basically a vertical structure that you can put outside and allows you, it's really great for small spaces because you can grow a lot of food in a very small footprint because you're going up rather than out. So it's great if you have, just a deck to garden on or a patio, or you're just looking to, get more food in your garden and you don't have more space. So I really love them for that reason. Tower structures, whether or not it's the tower garden or something similar to it, those are really great fits for things like lettuce greens, for herbs, for things that have, you can fit things like tomatoes or cucumbers or eggplants in them, but they aren't set up as well for those sorts of things. I really like them for the lettuce, salad greens, for herbs, and strawberries actually do really well in them too, because you're kind of looking for things that don't have super extensive root systems, so shorter root systems, and don't need a whole lot of space. So that really is strawberries, lettuces. And when I say lettuces, it's like any salad greens, right? So like mustard greens, arugula, spinach, Swiss chard, even those things all would really do well in a tower garden. And then most herbs would do well in a tower garden too. So I really love them for those kind of vertical setups. And I encourage you to try out. And those lettuce greens or salad greens and herbs also tend to be the easiest and the best place where I actually tell beginners to start anyway. So it's kind of a really great way to get your feet wet in gardening too.
Okay, so I'll let you know I got my feet wet with the tower garden, and it was interesting. The first year, I didn't really know about the root system or which I used starters, so I ordered from a place that had starters. I didn't start from seeds. That made it a little bit easier. Mm-hmm. But what I noticed was, I guess I didn't know how how to, and I did have some lettuces, and they turned out really well. I had cucumbers, and I picked cucumbers and some tomatoes. Like you said, they kind of took over. And so I had this overabundance of cucumbers, and it took over all the other stuff that I planted. Um, I tried strawberries, and then my strawberries didn't work. And so now my question would be, was it the combination of plants that I put together that maybe like why my strawberries didn't work? Or did the strawberries, does it need a certain amount of light? Like, I don't know. I just remember trying lettuce, strawberries, cucumbers, and some herbs, and the strawberries died out really quick.
Yeah. I mean, so as with any question, somebody comes to me like, why did this plant die? I There's like a series of like 20 questions I have to ask you back because, like you said, there are so many different variables. So, it could have been the sunlight. Salad greens thrive in lower sunlight levels. So if you're looking at, 4 to 6 hours, even lettuce greens, salad greens can often do well. Strawberries, you're going to want more sun. Those really like full sun. So it could have been a mismatch between where you had it placed and how much sun it was getting. Strawberries are really also very, they need very ample, consistent moisture. So potentially that could have been playing a role. I haven't used the tower garden myself, so I don't know if that's like an irrigation system, so it automatically waters. I think maybe it's supposed to be more hands off, right? If I remember right.
Yes, it is. It's supposed to be more hands off. And here's the thing that you got me remembering something now with the tower. It comes with chemicals like food. So you've got like 2 jugs, an acid and a base or something. And so it's like it's supposed to be hands off, not much work. But I remember I'm like this in the kitchen. I don't like to follow instructions. I don't like to measure things completely. And I'd just be like, put a little of this and put a little of that. And I might have killed the strawberry. I don't know. Because it worked fine the first year. Aside from strawberries dying, I had lots of lettuce greens and stuff. And then I'll tell you what I did the next year. I decided to shortcut again. And I got the brand that wasn't meant for the specific tower garden that I had. And I went online and got a brand off Amazon. And it completely, like, it went slimy on the inside. Like, it developed a slime, and it killed all my plants. So that's kind of my experience. And when she asked about the tower garden, I said, you're going to have to ask Danielle, because I've had these tower garden experiences that
Yeah.
I've had good and I've had bad. I've never had it be consistent. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you
And
have any advice for me there.
yeah, and so just to clarify that, the tower garden that we're talking about, the white one, that's a hydroponic system, right? There's no soil in there, correct? Yeah. So this
Yes,
is
there's
a
no
hydroponic
soil.
growing is like a completely different thing than in soil growing. And so what she's talking about with the acid and the base is basically it's filled with water, and then you add the nutrients to give it the right pH level and to give it the right nutrients that all plants need. Versus in the soil, you can add fertilizer to give the nutrients, and the soil itself acts as the pH conduit to give the nutrients to the plant. So it's a completely different kind of growing. And so if you're confused about what she's talking about there, that's why that's different. So I mean, hydroponic systems are really nice in that they offer a very controlled environment. So that's why a lot of people like growing with them. I myself have a very small aero garden in my kitchen, which is a hydroponic system as well, with a grow light, as part of it. And I use that for salad greens and herbs. I actually did just try, and it seems like it's working fairly well, micro tomato variety. So going back to your tomato experience, tomatoes and cucumbers, they are vining plants. So they're going to grow very large. They will take over, and they need some sort of structure to grow up, or they're going to grow out and down. And so that's why, you could probably, I'm sure there are people out there who have creatively used the tower garden to grow those crops, but you're going to need to like do additional things to make sure those crops have something to grow on, and you can't just stick it in like a lettuce plug or a spinach and have it grow well. But I did find, and this might be an option to try with the tower garden, a micro tomato variety that only gets to be like 12 inches tall. And so it's been bred to actually stay very small and not vine very long. And so I did try that in my aero garden, and that seems like that's working fairly well. But again, it's specifically a small footprint type of tomato. A normal tomato wouldn't work in an air garden either.
Okay, so lots of information on the tower so far. If we have any questions, garden questions, definitely drop them. Um, let's go back to the non-tower because I've had raised bed gardens too, and I've tried lots of different things in the past. But tell us a little bit about where we should begin, where we should start.
Yeah. So I think, and this is one of the things when people are wanting to start a garden, they get overwhelmed oftentimes at the beginning because, there's kind of two things you have to do. One is you have to wrap your head around all the knowledge involved with growing and all the different types of plants, what they all need. How do you take care of a plant and all the things that you have to like just know in order to be a good gardener. And then the other half of that is like all of the physical stuff, like building things, installing things, doing demo of your yard and, landscaping, and then buying all the stuff that you need and where do you source that, and what kind of quality are you needing to get. So there's kind of these two sides of the coin. It's the knowledge, but it's also like the implementation of actually like buying, sourcing your things and actually doing the hands-on stuff. So I always tell people, I really do like raised bed gardening as well because it allows you to control your soil very well. And it, right now it's definitely, if you're worried about your yard not looking, as clean or as pristine, and you don't want to like rip up a whole section of your yard, the raised bed garden's a really great option because it allows you to have a space to grow plants, but it also you don't have to dig up a part of your lawn. And it kind of contains it in like a stylish kind of neat structure. So I really do like the raised bed gardens for that. But you do have to source materials to build those beds. It takes time. You really want to be deliberate about where you place your raised beds because sunlight and water are two key considerations, and you want to make sure it's placed in the right place to get adequate water and adequate sunlight. And so you don't want to rush to make a decision about where to put your beds. And so, especially if you're new to a property, I generally tell people there's so much about just even the path of the sun through the sky and the way that shadows land in your yard you probably have never paid attention to if you've never gardened before. So I generally tell people you want a full season, like a full year of you being a gardener in your heart before you actually go out and build your raised beds, because that gives you time to actually pinpoint where in your yard is best from a sunlight perspective. And you will learn as you actually observe throughout the year, kind of slow down and actually look for things. You'll observe so much more in your yard than you ever have before. And so for the first year, it's a fair amount of money to invest in lumber, especially right now, lumber prices are really high. So lumber, if you're going to build wooden beds or sourcing, pre-made ones, those are not cheap either. And, it's a good investment to make, but you want to be making the investment, in a smart way. So I really recommend for the first year doing more of a container gardening style where you buy, you can either construct or buy just smaller module things that you could put maybe on a deck or a patio, or you can put it out in your lawn, but it's not the full blown raised bed that is pretty unmovable once you get it installed, because those things are super heavy. You're putting, lots of soil in those, and they really aren't meant to be movable once you install them. You can, but it's going to be a chore. So I really recommend just getting some, like 4 by 2 foot containers. Get like 2 or 3 of those for your first year. And that allows you to really dip your toe into gardening, to really get the basics of how to keep a plant alive underneath your belt. And you can get that installed in like a weekend. It's not like a long drawn out process. And then you can move them, or you can kind of try out different areas and then get a feel for what your yard offers you. And then the next year you can really do the installation of your beds. And also keep in mind, you don't have to do it all at the same time. So, you can build one bed one year, build the next bed the next year, and just kind of evolve over time.
Containers are good. You just reminded me, having a black thumb, I have had some luck with containers, and I used those soft containers. They're like bags almost.
Grow bags? Yeah.
What's your advice on those? I tried those last year with tomatoes and peppers, And I had really good success, but I should have had cages for my tomatoes because they do want to grow up. They need cages.
Yeah.
And so I didn't get cages, so I knew that was a problem. And then I got some peppers, and the peppers didn't seem to grow very big, though. I was disappointed. But give us some advice on those grow bags, or what do you think about those?
Yeah, so grow bags are something that you can definitely try out. They're great from the perspective that they're inexpensive and they're easy to set up. The the thing with containers of any size is that the size and the material really weigh into how often you're going to have to water. So with the grow bags, because they're pretty small and because they're made of that permeable cloth material, they dry out super quickly. So kind of the general rule of thumb is the larger a container, the less quickly it dries out, and then like the thicker um, different materials dry out at different speeds. I guess there's not like one way I can say that, but the grow bag material will dry out very quickly. So the thing with them is you have to really keep on top of watering. And if you don't have consistent water, or if you go too long in between waterings, you can run into problems. And if you're in like a super hot climate, you could be even watering that like twice a day, even. So the grow bags are something that, if you're going to do them, I actually might even ask you to look into your like drip irrigation hose, because you can coil a drip irrigation hose in a grow bag and then that will water it as it needs, and then that'll allow it to grow. And I would say that's probably why your pepper plant didn't do so well, because peppers really need the water. And so I'm anticipating that it just wasn't getting the water it needs. Peppers, eggplants, and tomatoes are probably the three um, crops I would really say probably meet the grow bag well, because they like hot temperatures. So they aren't going to suffer because it's hot in the bag, but they will suffer if you aren't giving them the moisture they need. So drip irrigation plus the grow bag is kind of a nice combination if you can get that set up. Or you just
Okay,
water
that's
by
where I went
hand.
wrong.
Have a timer and make sure you're out there at least once a day, probably, if not twice a day, even on the hottest days.
That's where I went wrong. I had them placed in a very sunny spot, and I knew they needed a lot of sun, but it was also hot summer. And we'd go out of town, and I know they were not getting twice a day water. So
Yeah.
that's what I did with those. That's good to
Yeah.
know.
And that's why drip
Um,
irrigation is so great, because you can go out of town for, a couple days. Um, it's not a set it and forget it the entire summer. You should still be out there making sure that the water level is appropriate, but it would allow you to go out of town for a week or so and know that your plants are still getting watered outside appropriately.
okay, that's good. That's good to know. So I don't know if anyone else has this question, but I know that I have this question. I'm now in a very urban place. I don't have a yard anymore. If I wanted to grow something, what would you suggest? I do have a lot of light in our place, but we don't have a balcony, but we have a wall that's basically windows. So what should we even attempt something, since we don't really have a balcony or anything?
Yeah, there's still things you can grow. I would say the things that I tell beginners to start with are also the things that do well in the lower light. So it's really those salad greens and the herbs, because they can really do well between, as long as for most herbs, if you give them 4 hours of sunlight, they will grow. 6 is better, but as long as they're getting at least 6, that's good. The thing with indoor sun that's tricky is that even if your sun is coming through the window and it seems bright to you, the window itself, the window pane, any like material you have up, like curtains, awnings outside, those all will reduce the amount of sunlight that's actually making its way from the sun to your plant. So full sun outdoors is always going to be brighter than what appears to be full sun indoors. So you have to just be aware of that. But that's why, if you think about 6 hours of sunlight, if it's a direct sunlight, like very, very bright, like you put your hand out and it's completely illuminated, that's like direct sun. So it sounds to me, if you're having a full, windowed wall, that would be something that would lend itself well, definitely to salad greens and to herbs. And depending on how much sun you're getting, you could potentially do fruiting plants, but fruiting plants just need a lot of energy. So those are fruiting plants, meaning botanically fruit, tomatoes, cucumbers, eggplants, squashes, things like that. So they really need like 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight outside. And that's hard to get indoors. But what you're describing, potentially, depending how big the windows are and like how intense that sunlight is, may or may not allow that to happen. But and then there's also things like the Aero Garden too. Like you can buy grow lights for indoors too if you're really wanting to have like a mini tomato plant. You write a grow light to supplement and get enough sun on the plants too.
Okay, I think I might start small and start with herbs and see how that goes. And tell us, you mentioned something about like having the heart for the garden for a year before you actually build the garden. Tell us more about that. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, like I think a lot of people come, people come to gardening for lots of different reasons. Some people want it just because they want to know where their food comes from and they know that it's grown in a healthy way and that it's not, you know, unhealthy in some way with pesticides or other growing conditions. Some people want it just because it's more convenient when you have fresh food available. Some people just want it because it's a fun hobby and something to do with their kids. But whatever your reasoning is for getting interested in gardening, like you have a reason and it's calling to you. And I think a lot of people in the craziness of day-to-day life might not heed that call because they have 1,000 other things going on. They don't think they have enough time to garden. They think they have a black thumb. They don't think that they can keep anything alive. And I think growing food is something that is fundamental to us as humans, right? Like back thousands, millions of years ago, we all grew our own food. And I think there's something, it connects us with nature in a way that, we sorely need in today's modern world. And it's just a reason to get outside. It's a reason to get outside and appreciate nature, feel connected to nature and something bigger than you is something that I think we all kind of need. And so I think once you step into that role of a gardener, you're just going to see things differently. You're going to notice things that you don't notice typically. I think you get really inspired by nature and just, kind of go back to how you were as a kid. If you have kids, that kids are kind of just always like, wow, that's amazing. Like, look at this bug. And as a human or as an adult, you kind of just tend to rush past the awe-inspiring moments, and gardening kind of requires you to slow down and actually pay attention to it. So that's kind of what I mean is like thinking as a gardener and paying attention to the things you need to pay attention to as a gardener and just starting to think differently and kind of stepping into a little bit slower, more appreciative, more observational day-to-day life.
I love that. I do talk a lot about intuitive eating, and we were all born intuitive eaters, and the best people to watch are kids when they're around food and when they're eating. So you're talking about like going back to kids with gardening. It's the same thing, and it's really slowing down. And this is a different way to take care of ourselves. We're always talking about self-care in this group. And I had someone come on last year. Her name was B. Bangar, and she talks about slow living. So these are all different ways, I think, to slow down and be present and be mindful. I just have enjoyed chatting with you. I don't see any more questions. However, I want people to know where they can find you and where they can learn more about gardening if they need to, like have questions, need to be inspired, need a coach. Let us know like what you do and where we can find you.
Yeah, so the best way to connect with me, I have a Facebook group myself called Garden Like a Mother. So if you search Facebook for Garden Like a Mother, that group should come up. So you can feel free to join that. Similar to you, I have like a live weekly show that I do on different gardening topics throughout the year that change for seasonality, and then just share lots of tips and tricks in there. And people are always invited to post pictures of their gardens or questions. If they're having issues with a plant, you can post a picture of a plant and say what's going on, and then I can play my 20 questions game with you. And so that's a free resource. And then I also do work one-on-one with people who want to start gardening or up their gardening game, and that's working for a ongoing basis with you throughout the growing season to really help you, start wherever you are. So if you're a brand new gardener, I will help you learn the basics of horticulture. We will put together a design for your garden, and I'll step you through the process of installing that, and then getting your garden started. So that's really working with you throughout the growing season so that we can get you on the path to your garden dreams and really set a good foundation for having a good garden in the future.
That's awesome. Okay, so garden like a mother. And I did have one more thing that come into my head when you were talking about the seasons. That's another thing that always confused me was where do I, like right now we're going into spring and there's certain seasons you can plant certain plants.
Yeah.
So just getting with you, I guess, is the best thing. Definitely don't come to me, guys.
And that seasonality piece was one of the things that I found most confusing when I was starting out. And it really is like a puzzle because certain crops are conditioned or better suited for different conditions throughout the year, right? Like as you say. And so you have to kind of figure out how to use the space you have in the most efficient way to slot in and out crops that are going to be growing in their adequate conditions. And then as one's finishing, you want to have something else take its place. So that whole puzzle is oftentimes what people that's like the last straw for them when they are overwhelmed with their gardens, is when they actually start working with me, because they realize I just don't know how to make this all work together. They might feel like they have the building blocks underneath them for the horticulture, which once we start working together, they realize they actually didn't. But they usually think that they have the basics, and it's that puzzle piece of where to put things, when to plant them, how to switch them in and out throughout the year. That tends to be kind of that overwhelming last straw why people start working with me. So if that's where you're at, I totally feel you. Definitely reach out to me, and we can put together a plan for you that makes sense. And I can also teach you why it makes sense so that you can put your own plans together in the future.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm over in her Facebook group, Garden Like a Mother. You guys hop over there too. I'm going to start with some very basic herbs and lettuce, and I'm going to stop saying I have a black thumb, because what do we do?
Yes.
I teach this all the time in my group. Now, what do we do when we say things and it becomes a thought? We feel it, and it becomes true, what we think and what we say. So I'm going to stop saying I have a black thumb. This is the year that
it's a myth, right? It's a skill like anything else.
Danielle, my mom was like she was a huge gardener, and so I know I've got it in me.
Yeah, totally.
All right, thank you so much for coming on today, you guys. If you are catching the replay, definitely #replay. Leave any questions for Danielle below, and we'll get them answered for you. Thank you so much for coming on, Danielle.
Fun to talk.